mother's instructions were simple. Dinner was in the fridge. Bedtime was at 8. No sweets after 7. She spoke in that calm, rehearsed way that parents do when they've hired a babysitter before. The father barely acknowledged me, his focus on his phone. When she finished, he muttered a quick, "Thanks," before following her out the door. They left at exactly 7. The kids were easy. Jake, 6, didn't look up from his tablet. He sat cross-legged on the couch, absorbed in whatever game he was playing. Lily, 4, curled up beside him, half watching a cartoon. She clutched a stuffed bear in one hand, rubbing its ear between her fingers. I took a seat in the armchair nearby, scrolling on my phone while keeping an eye on them. The house was quiet, not in an unsettling way, just the usual stillness of a well-insulated home. Occasionally, the hum of the refrigerator kicked in. The baseboards let out soft clicks as the heat cycled through. The night passed in routine. Dinner was easy. Lily barely touched hers. Jake finished quickly and returned to his game. Teeth were brushed with little protest. They climbed into bed without stalling. I lingered for a few moments after tucking them in. The nightlight cast soft shadows across their room. The baby monitor sat on the dresser, its small screen glowing. Jake had already rolled onto his side, one leg kicked free from the blanket. Lily clutched her bear tighter, her breath slowing. Downstairs, I settled onto the couch. The baby monitor sat beside me on the coffee table, its low static blending into the background noise of the house. I picked up my phone and scrolled absent-mindedly. At 8:45, a vibration against my palm. A message. My brother is picking them up. Plans changed. He'll be there in 15. I frowned slightly but typed back. Got it. The message was short, almost abrupt, but I didn't question it. Parents forget to mention things. Maybe they had to leave earlier than expected. Maybe it was an emergency. I put the phone down and kept scrolling, waiting for the sound of a car in the driveway. At exactly 9 o'clock, headlights swept across the window before shutting off. A vehicle idled outside for a moment, the faint rumble of the engine breaking the stillness of the house. A door creaked open. Slow, deliberate footsteps approached the front step. A man stood just beyond the threshold, medium height, lean build, dark jacket. His stance was casual, hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed, but something about the way he stood felt too composed. He didn't knock. I hesitated before opening the door. "You must be the babysitter," he said. His tone was light, practiced, like he had said these words many times before. "I'm here for Jake and Lily." There was nothing unnatural about his voice, nothing overtly strange, but it had the effortless ease of someone accustomed to making people believe him. Dinner was in the fridge. Bedtime was at 8. No sweets. Upstairs, the hallway was dim. The faint blue glow from the baby monitor screen cast long shapes across the walls. The air was still, heavy with that muffled quiet that settles after a house has gone to sleep. I nudged Jake's shoulder. "Hey, buddy. Time to go." He stirred, shifting under the blanket. His breathing was slow, unfazed, the way kids get when they've been asleep, just long enough to forget where they are. He rubbed his eyes. Jake sat up sluggishly, swinging his legs over the edge of the bed. I lifted Lily carefully. She was warm, dead weight in my arms, her head pressing into my shoulder as she murmured something unintelligible. The floorboards creaked softly under my steps as I carried her down. Jake trailed behind me, barefoot, his movements slow. He blinked against the hallway light as we reached the bottom of the stairs. The front door was still ajar. The man stood just inside now, 1 foot over the threshold. His hands were still in his pockets. He watched as I approached, his face calm, unreadable. The streetlights from outside threw shadows across the entryway, making his features harder to read. Jake took 1 step forward, then stopped. His small fingers curled around the hem of my shirt. His gaze flicked up toward the man. He didn't move closer. He stared. "You're not Uncle Matt." His voice was small, but the weight of the words cut through everything. The man's expression didn't change at first. Then, subtly, something shifted. His jaw tensed, just for a second, before his face smoothed again. Lily shifted in my arms, murmuring against my shoulder. The man's fingers curled slightly in his pocket. "I'm a friend of your parents," he said. His tone was steady, but too smooth now, too measured. "Come on, your mom's waiting." Jake didn't move. His grip on my shirt tightened. I adjusted Lily in my arms, taking half a step back. "Hold on. Let me call their mom real quick." "No need," he said, too fast. The space between us felt smaller now, though neither of us had moved. I turned slightly, keeping Jake behind me. The man shifted his weight forward, not stepping in, not stepping back. His fingers flexed inside his pocket. I shut the door, locked it. For a moment, nothing. Then a knock. I didn't answer. Another tap. Then silence. Jake stayed close, still gripping my shirt. Lily stirred, but she didn't wake. I grabbed my phone. "Your brother is here, but Jake says it's not him. Is he using a different car?" The reply came immediately. "What? My brother's not picking them up. Who's there?" I looked down at the message thread, stomach tightening. The original text wasn't from the mother's usual number. There was no name at the top, no contact photo. I had assumed it was her, hadn't even checked. The message was short, vague, nothing personal. No greeting, no sign-off. Outside, a car door shut. Tires rolled over the pavement. The sound faded down the street. I checked the locks, the windows, the curtains. Jake looked up at me. "Who was that man?" I didn't answer. The mother walked me through the routine as she gathered her things. Dinner was already set aside in the fridge. The kids could watch TV until 8, then straight to bed. I had been here before. 2 kids, Daniel, 8, and Sophie, 5. Daniel followed instructions without fuss. Sophie was different. She watched, observed, held long, deliberate eye contact without blinking. At 7, I made them dinner. They ate without complaint. Daniel finished quickly. Sophie barely touched hers, moving the food around on her plate. When I asked if something was wrong, she shook her head but kept staring. By 7:45, they were in the living room watching cartoons. Daniel curled up under a blanket. Sophie sat cross-legged on the floor, hands neatly folded in her lap. I checked my phone while the colors from the screen flickered across her face. At 8, I told them it was time for bed. Daniel yawned, stretched, and went upstairs without a word. Sophie didn't move. Her fingers curled slightly against her pajama pants. "You don't like me," she said. Her voice was soft, matter-of-fact. I frowned, caught off guard. "What?" "You don't like me." She turned her head slightly, her eyes still locked on mine. "You're scared of me." A small laugh left my throat, but something about her tone made me shift my weight. Why would I be scared of you? She didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, she stood. The last babysitter screamed too much. The words were deliberate. There was no playfulness in her voice, no hint that she was joking. I stared at her. My fingers felt stiff at my sides. What do you mean? She was loud, Sophie said simply. That's why he didn't like her. Who? My voice came out quieter than I intended. Sophie tilted her head slightly, like she was considering something. The man in the house. I blinked, exhaling through my nose, willing myself to stay composed. There's no man in the house, Sophie. Yes, there is. She spoke with certainty, as if she had already decided what was true. He told me not to tell, but I think he wants you to know. Something cold crept into my stomach. Sophie reached out suddenly, her small fingers wrapping around my wrist. I'll show you. I pulled my arm back, gently but firmly. It's bedtime, I said, keeping my tone even. She stared for a moment longer, then turned and walked upstairs. I stayed on the couch long after her door clicked shut. The house was silent. No footsteps, no shifting from the bedrooms. I checked my phone, scrolling absently, trying to push the conversation from my mind. At 10 o'clock, the mother texted, "Everything okay?" I hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I typed, "Yeah, everything's fine." At 10:30, I checked the locks. The front door was bolted. The back door too. The windows were shut. The silence in the house stretched long. At 11 o'clock, I heard it. Subtle, coming from upstairs. Footsteps, not a child's. I held still, listening. The creaking moved toward the hallway. Then it stopped. Slowly, I stood. The living room suddenly felt too open. My hands flexed at my sides. The wooden stairs groaned under my weight as I climbed, slow and careful. The hallway was dim, the faint glow of the bathroom nightlight throwing weak shadows across the floor. Daniel's door was shut. Sophie's door was slightly open. I reached out and pushed it wider. Her bed was empty. The blanket was pulled back neatly, like she had left on purpose. I turned, scanning the hallway. My pulse was a steady thud in my ears. A faint noise caught my attention. From the far end of the hall, the closet door was ajar. I swallowed, stepping toward it. The weak glow from the nightlight barely reached inside. My fingers found the pull string, yanking it. The bulb flickered on. The closet was empty. Just a small gap in the wall. A panel slightly open. A crawl space. My breath was slow, controlled. Then I heard it. A quiet giggle. From inside the crawl space. I stepped back. My feet moved without hesitation, carrying me down the stairs through the front hall. The deadbolt turned under my hand. I stepped outside, shutting the door behind me. The cold air bit at my skin, but I barely noticed. My phone was already in my hand, the screen glowing in the dark. I called the mother. The line rang. Then her voice groggy. "Hey, is everything okay?" Sophie isn't in bed. I checked her room. She's not there. The sound of movement on her end. Sheets rustling. A door opening. We're on our way. She hung up. I stayed on the porch, watching the dark street. The minutes stretched, long and unbroken. No movement from inside the house. No sound. 15 minutes later, headlights appeared. The car pulled in fast. The mother got out first, followed closely by the father. She looked at me, eyes wide. Where is she? I shook my head. A noise from inside the house. Soft footsteps. We turned. Sophie stood in the doorway. Her pajamas were clean, her hands folded in front of her. "I was in bed," she said. The mother let out a breath, pressing a hand to her chest. The father exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. They ushered the kids inside. The mother turned to me before following them in. "I'm so sorry," she said. "Thank you for staying." I nodded, then I left. A week later, the mother texted me. "Did Sophie say anything strange that night?" I stared at the screen, fingers still over the keyboard. I typed, "Why?" "She keeps talking about a man in the house." My hands went still. Then I deleted the message thread. I never babysat for them again. I had babysat for the Parker family a few times before. They lived in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town, in one of those houses that looked bigger on the inside than it did from the street. Their 2-year-old, Oliver, was an easy kid. He went to bed early, barely fussed, and never made trouble. The parents were heading out for a late dinner. Mrs. Parker left a list on the kitchen counter, mostly things I already knew: snack options, bedtime routine, emergency contacts. I nodded along, reassured them that everything would be fine, and watched their car disappear down the road. Oliver had already been put down for the night. I turned on the baby monitor, set it on the coffee table, and curled up on the couch with my phone. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the wooden floors, shifting with the evening temperature. An hour passed. I got up to grab a soda from the fridge. As I walked back into the living room, something caught my attention. Faint smudges of dirt stretched across the hardwood floor, leading from the front door toward the hallway. I stopped. I was sure I had locked the door after the Parkers left. Had I tracked something in earlier? I crouched down, touched one of the marks. The dirt was still loose, not yet dried into the floor. It hadn't been there before. I checked the front door. The deadbolt was in place. The chain still latched. Every window I had passed earlier was closed. The baby monitor crackled. A soft rustling sound came through the speaker. I glanced at the screen. The room was dark, but the faint, greenish hue of night vision showed Oliver curled up in his crib, motionless. I returned to the couch, set the monitor next to me. The footprints bothered me. They weren't mine, too large, spaced too far apart. I tried to let it go, but every few minutes, my eyes drifted back toward the entryway. I pulled up the security app on my phone. The Parkers had a system connected to their front and back doors, plus a few indoor cameras. I tapped the feed labeled "Living Room." The screen showed the view from above the fireplace, angled toward the couch. The empty couch. My breath caught in my throat. I was looking at a live feed. I should have been in the frame. The system was working. I had just seen myself on it earlier, right after the Parkers left. Now, it was as if I wasn't there at all. I switched to the front porch camera. The driveway was empty. No movement on the street. I tapped back to the living room feed. Still nothing. The couch remained empty. I raised my hand in front of me, waved it back and forth. The screen didn't change. A muffled thump came from the baby monitor. I looked at the screen again. Oliver hadn't moved, but something in the room had shifted. The closet door, half open when I had last checked, now stood wide open, revealing hanging clothes and the dark space beyond. I stood slowly, listening. No sound from the hallway, nothing outside. I reached for the nearest light switch, flicked it on. The glow filled the room instantly, stark against the quiet darkness of the rest of the house. I took a step toward the hallway, then another. The baby monitor crackled again. The closet door in the monitor wasn't open anymore. It was closed. I ran, straight to Oliver's room, phone gripped tight in one hand. The door was open just as I had left it. The crib was in the same position. I flicked on the overhead light and took a shaky step inside. Oliver lay on his back, sleeping soundly. The closet door was shut. I hesitated before reaching for the closet handle, bracing myself as I pulled it open in one swift motion. Empty. Just the usual. Stacks of diapers, a few toys, tiny jackets hanging neatly in a row. I exhaled, closed it again. The baby monitor had glitched, that was all. The camera system was probably malfunctioning, maybe a bad Wi-Fi connection. There were explanations for everything. I left the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. Back in the living room, I checked the security feed again. My reflection was back on the screen. I let out a breath, rubbed my face, and sat down. The front door handle turned. The chain caught, the door stopping with a dull clank. I froze. My pulse pounded as I stared at the door. Someone had tried to open it from the outside. Seconds passed. The house was silent again. I stood and approached the door slowly, peering through the peephole. The porch was empty. The street was just as it had been all evening. I checked the locks again. The deadbolt was in place. I double-checked the back door, the windows. Everything was secure. My mind raced for an explanation, but nothing sat right. A soft creak came from the hallway behind me. I turned sharply. The house was still, the light from the living room casting shadows down the narrow corridor. I took slow steps toward Oliver's room. The baby monitor was silent. The door stood open, just as I had left it. I reached the doorway, looked inside. The crib was empty. The blankets were pulled back as if someone had just lifted him out. My mind blanked. My body moved before I could think. I ran to the closet, threw it open. Nothing. I checked under the crib, under the changing table. I turned back to the hallway, eyes scanning every inch of the floor, the sound of fabric rustling. I spun toward the corner of the room. The curtain shifted slightly, the smallest motion. My hands shook as I reached forward, yanking them aside. Oliver sat on the floor, wide-eyed, silent. I grabbed him, held him against me. His tiny hands clenched my shirt, but he didn't make a sound. His breathing was steady, slow. The front door opened. Footsteps. I clutched Oliver and turned toward the sound. A figure stepped into the dim light of the hallway. Mrs. Parker. Her face twisted in confusion when she saw me holding Oliver in the dark. "Why are you?" she started, then saw the look on my face. I couldn't speak. I barely remembered handing Oliver to her, mumbling something about checking the locks, making sure everything was secure. She looked at me strangely but didn't question it. I left quickly, stepping outside before I could let my thoughts settle. I never told her what happened, not that night, not ever. The next morning, she sent me a message, thanking me for babysitting. She mentioned something else, too. She had found the back door unlocked when they got home. She asked if I had gone outside. I told her no.